This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1935, Off the Rack Review of Helen of Wyndhorn, issue 1. Welcome to Comic Geek Speak. I'm Peter Rios.
I'm Bryan Chrisman.
I'm Adam Murdo.
And I'm Brian Deemer.
That sounds so weird to say that way. We haven't done that in a while. All right, so this is an off-the-rack review. If you do not know what an off-the-rack review is, this is our way. This was coined, I believe, by Jamie. I believe Jamie coined this title for this kind of episode. It's just a look at a current comic. Now, usually more than one or something that we're reading either together or individually. But we decided to just pick one, as the title suggested, Helen of Wyndhorn, number 1, from Dark Horse Comics, written by Tom King, art by Bilquis Evely, colors by Matheus Lopes, letters by Clayton Cowles, with a whole bunch of alternate covers and editors and such. As we were going through the list of, what could we talk about that's current, something that would hopefully appeal to all of us. Truth be told, I was looking at Marvel and DC for a new number 1 around this time. Wasn't too thrilled with what was coming out. They're either in this lull period between major things, right? So Marvel's gearing up for all the new X-Men stuff. DC's sort of at the tail end of their dawn of DC. So but this one definitely popped out. Most of us are well acquainted with Tom King personally through the podcast as an author. I'm assuming some of us have read the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow story that has the same creative team. And this just felt like a really good choice to focus on for this episode. Helen of Wyndhorn, number 1. Adam, could I call on you to give a short synopsis or just an idea of what this is?
Okay. The framing device is a young man, appears to be a grad student or a doctoral researcher or something, who is interviewing an older lady about who used to be a governess back in the prime of her life in the 30s and 40s about one particular charge that she had back in the late 30s, whose name was Helen Cole, and she was the daughter of a well-known writer of pulp fantasy novels, C.K. Cole, and he wanted this lady to tell him everything that she knew about this daughter and possibly her father. And then she relates the story of how she first got to know Helen Cole and her family at their palatial family dwelling of Wyndhorn. And gradually it sort of comes to light in this first issue that the sword and sorcery pulp stories that Helen's father wrote were something more than mere fiction, that there's a basis of fact behind the fantasy, and that his father, Helen's grandfather, is basically a real-life Conan living in our world. And so there's a lot of foreshadowing going on in this first issue, a lot of character establishment, but just tantalizing possibilities for where the premise can go beyond that first issue.
And as in all our off-the-rack discussions, we are going to go in depth. So if you haven't read the issue and you don't want to know, you can save it for later, which is why we're sort of isolating it in an episode. Or if you don't care and want to just hear about it, that's what we're going to do. We used to do buy, borrow, pants, if you liked it, if you sort of liked it and you didn't like it. So if we had to just do that, buy, borrow, pants, what would your rating be for it?
A buy.
Okay, I would buy it.
I would also buy it.
100% a buy.
Great. Okay. Are we biased because Tom King has been in our studio before?
No, I wouldn't think so.
No, I don't think so either.
What drew this, no pun intended, what drew this to me was the art. Bilquis Evely, I first remember seeing her work on a Sugar and Spike series in the Legends of Tomorrow, and I just dug her artwork. Eventually, got the Supergirl, didn't get it when it came out, but read it, loved that, and loved their art on this, and just the story, the non-linear storytelling. I love that trope, if you will, but I think it's really executed here very well.
Yeah, because it allows for like the sort of potential, the surprises that Adam mentioned, because it's like she's telling that flashback tale, but yet you can still see how that story in the past affects the future. So, like, real quick, there's one thing that was interesting. It's more an art thing than anything. She comments about Helen being 16 years old, drinks, smokes, and then you cut to the future, and in near the end, what does the older woman do? She pulls out a pack of cigarettes, right? Because she
Yeah.
back
After
then,
at one point in the flashback, she comes right out and says in so many words to Helen when she demands some cigarettes, smoking is a filthy vice that it's only engaged in by sinners who wish to distract from their need for penance. And so the suggestion there is that somewhere along the line, Lilith, the governess, does something that for which she will require penance, and there she is sitting there smoking her cigarettes to show us that.
yeah. So
So just
that
wonderful.
level of storytelling is amazing. It's easy. It's not to take anything away from it, but it's easy. It's fun. It really shows you like the marriage of the words and the picture. So, who else? General thoughts, Brian?
I mean, it sucked me right in. I read it in, one quick sitting. I plowed through it. And, you warned us. You were like, hey, start reading because it's wordy and it might take a while, right? But I just read it in like 20 minutes just because I
Hmm.
couldn't stop because it was
Same
so
here.
good. And the artwork is just absolutely gorgeous. Um, and I also liked like the juxtaposition of the beginning of the story in sort of like the Dust Bowl setting, and then to this incredible, estate, like the exact opposite of the Dust Bowl, right? Like a posh estate, the huge mansion, and everything. So visually, it covered like two sides, and it was really really cool. Just and yeah, I mean, the story was. I'm certainly curious what happens next because I really have no idea what's coming. I think that's what's pretty cool about it. Like you have this story on the surface that feels, yeah, okay. I mean, it's a, rags to riches kind of thing happening here. All right. But there's clearly a whole lot more going on. And I can't predict to you what is going to happen in issue 2, let alone issue 6. Right. So I love that because maybe I'm naive, but I don't have any guesses. Anything could happen because it seems like he's setting it up, but I don't know what he's setting up.
Yeah, and I didn't even know it was going to be 6 issues until I think I got to the. I thought it was like an ongoing series. I didn't know, but you talking about what's coming up, there was a mention about the daughter that she suffered a similar fate to her father. It's like, okay, ooh, okay, no, what does that mean? It's like I wonder what that means because the father, I love the name Barnabas Cole.
No, that's the grandfather.
Yeah.
Oh, that's grandpa. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Christopher Krieger Cole, like committed suicide. So it's like, okay, what caused him to do that? Was it all these demons and things you see around the house? So
I was trying to think. Wasn't there a story? Is it a story? Is it a movie where it's kind of the same premise where somebody is writing about something, but then you find out that it actually happened to an ancestor, or is that premise just sometimes used enough that I can't remember. I know there was something, a movie, a comic, or something, but because I read like one of the reviews of this said, it's like Conan the Barbarian meets Wizard of Oz. I don't quite see where the Wizard of Oz thing comes in just yet, but um, this notion of, okay, the story starts off almost without any sort of supernatural flair or fantasy flair outside of just whatever this astonishing stories of mystery book is. Um, and it's not until later when Helen is being chased by that monster creature. It almost looked like a bat creature. I was like, is Tom King channeling his Batman, his
Maybe.
his Barbados stuff? Um, that's when you start to really get into the whole fantasy aspect of it. And of course, when you see Barnabas, you're like, okay, well, there you go, you know. So that was all really that was fun. You I sort of knew something had to happen by the end, but I wasn't sure how it was going to happen. Then I was trying to also think about pulp and fantasy at this time as well. What is this going to be a story about that? Pre superhero, right? Because when does this take place?
Well, 1935, I think, is when he passed away, according to I think the tombstone. I think we got that information from.
Yep, that's when Lilith, the narrator, enters the lives of the Cole family.
Right.
And meanwhile, the framing sequence only takes us about as far forward as the latter half of the 80s.
There's just something in that kind of feels like it's too early to say, but is this a way to get out of the superhero stuff and into the pulp stuff that inspired eventually the superhero stuff, you know? So
okay.
When you say things like 1935 to me, you know, like
that's the DC Comics, I think More Fun Comics #1, right?
That's the 50th anniversary that Crisis was supposed to celebrate.
Yeah.
So I might be reading into that, but we'll see.
Oh, and by the way, Peter, the Conan meets Wizard of Oz, that comes from Dark Horse's solicit.
Oh, well,
yeah. I see it right on their web. It's like in the very first paragraph.
Yeah, I agree. The Wizard of Oz angle is not very clear to me either, Peter.
Right.
And you're way more familiar than I am with that property. Adam, your thoughts on this?
Well, I thought it was very well constructed story. I enjoy the building of suspense. I like the framing of the figure of Christian Cole, like the Robert E. Howard figure here, if you will, who's not seen at any point in the story, but he's beginning to take shape in like the negative space of all the other characters associated with him, like his daughter's recollections of and reverence for him, having recently died as of 1935, and this geeky grad student who's obviously there talking to this old lady with his little handheld tape recorder because he's studying the work of this Mr. Cole and just learning about his daughter because of her connection to that. So, finding out more about him and, the void he's left in the lives of his family members, because obviously you see who Helen Cole is. We're introduced to her here, and then her grandfather shows up, and probably the next issue will be mostly about him. But what's like the connection between the two? What's the missing link between like this old man Conan Barbarian and his daughter, who, according to the first splash page, is probably going to follow in his footsteps? And then in between, you've got this pulp writer guy. So I'm curious as to what shape his character is going to take. I like, of course, the artwork by Bilquis Evely is indeed gorgeous. It's almost like a pulp illustration on every page. What I don't like so much is the character of Helen herself, because I don't know. Tom King is on kind of a rowdy, hard drinking teenage girl kick right now, because that's basically what we got in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow at the beginning. She's out there on like an interplanetary bar crawl, being kind of immature and irresponsible, just trying to get drunk out there in space until she stumbles onto the situation that becomes the central conflict of the story and leads to her maturing into a woman of tomorrow. And here we have this Helen Wyndhorn, who is 16 years old, and we first meet her. She's in a drunk tank at a local police department, sleeping off a bender, and then she gets taken away to her grandfather's mansion up in the mountains, Wyndhorn, and she just spends all her time avoiding her childminders and getting drunk in various alcoves of the mansion. And as far as I'm concerned, Lilith the governess and Joseph the butler are the heroes of this issue, and she is the nuisance. I was cheering for them as much as I cheered for the principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and you know how much love I have for that movie. I have no affinity for rebellious teenage characters. I want to when Joseph the butler proposes we could chain her, That seemed like a perfectly reasonable course of action to me. I was totally in his corner at that point. So yeah, that's the one thing I didn't like about this story, and I probably wasn't supposed to like it, is Helen herself. But, at the end of the story, Grandpa's home, and the whole dynamic with her will change now that this, additional X factor's been introduced.
I mean, she takes a wine bottle, smashes the tip of it, not just opens it, smashes it, and sticks that shard, that
Yep,
crack
that
thing
jagged bottleneck right into her mouth. And
right into her mouth.
while the horrified wine steward / butler is standing there stammering, and because this is his project after all, maintaining the wine cellar, since Barnabas Cole doesn't drink much apparently, and here she is like desecrating and abusing his little private store down there. I felt for the guy. I mean, I'm not sure why Lilith, the narrator, didn't like Joseph, but I think I identified with him more than I did any other character in the story, frankly.
Yeah. He said, not only did he say, I might have to chain her, and Lilith says, and have you chains, Joseph? And he says, I do, but they may be too large for this task, which makes me think, does that have
Bondage?
any connection? No, oh, no. I was thinking more
For the creatures.
for the creatures.
Yeah, for the creatures, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, one thought I had was that the monster that was pursuing Helen might actually have been Joseph if he was like a lycanthrope of some kind.
Ooh.
And Barnabas shows up and cuts off his head, and then he gets better.
He's one of those werewolves, so his head grows back as soon as you lop it off.
Wasn't a silver bullet, was it?
It's true.
It's true.
Well.
It's true.
Is her character any kind of commentary on who is usually the main hero of pulp stories and fantasy stories of that era, right? Were they rebellious, or were they the straight-laced, heroic young youth, do you think he's doing that on purpose? Well, obviously he's doing it on purpose because that's our character. That's who we have to deal with, and it's a way to also, it's generational, it's class, it's because I think, wasn't there a little bit of dialogue about when she finally sees the place and she says something about, oh, my father grew up here, but yet he also fled from here, so
It was free.
yeah,
The two of them were traveling together, just hitchhiking, riding the rails and like boxcars, and sneaking out of like flop houses without paying the bill.
right.
That was the side of her father she knew, and here she is being confronted with his past, which I guess she seems to equate in her mind with oppression and imprisonment. And then here comes the guy who's the master of the household, and he's this barbarian warrior who's cutting off the heads of monsters. And so maybe in future issues she won't see it as quite the classist dungeon that she seemed to think it was at first.
I'm curious about Lilith herself. Like, you can't name a character Lilith and not think that there's got to be something to that name or something to that character.
Well, maybe there are allusions there to like the apocryphal first wife of Adam, or who's been long since co-opted as a feminist figure, or maybe it's just it just struck Tom as like a prim and proper governess's name, old lady name.
I can just only think of Cheers with Lilith.
Yep. Lilith Stern and Crane, Baby Newirth. Yeah. If he's trying to bring across her uptightness, then yeah, that connection would certainly do the job with readers of a certain age.
And the artwork is just, so I have not read Supergirl. So I usually pick up Tom King's books physically, and then there's every now and then I'm like, I think I'll read that in the trade because I think I might read better,
Yeah, I made that same decision with Supergirl, Peter.
Yeah, and I regretted it once I started seeing images of the first couple issues because I was like, wow, that's actually really beautiful. I am not familiar with her artwork. But the world building in this and the level of detail in costumes, architecture,
yeah, that establishing shot, like the full page splash of Wyndhorn the first time we see it, this is gorgeous.
Yeah. Like, was it Brian, are you the one who said that? Something about like every page is a whatever? Who said something like
Yeah,
that?
that was me.
Oh, that was you. Yeah. Like that's a cover, right? Like
Hmm.
it's like those
Hmm.
every now and then I see threads where they're like, "Oh, look at all these gothic horror. It's always like some woman running from a mansion into the woods." And it's like this is perfect. It's perfect for it. But yet it still has like the hint of fantasy and the hint of not being totally realism, and I appreciate that as well. But the architecture, my God, like this is stunning. The color work is great. It's a little monochromatic in the past and then gets a little more colorful in the present.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
like the Thomas, the grad student's like purple and yellow members only jacket or whatever it is.
yeah, just really, this was my first reading experience for that art team, and I was just like, wow, this is great.
Speaking of Thomas, I kind of enjoyed that character personally because I guarantee you there were guys a lot like that who were earning the master's degree I earned at Bowling Green back in the 80s. Probably just, I mean, I'm not sure yet why Tom chose to set like the future level of the story only as far forward as the 80s. Um, Maybe it's just because that was when like academics started to wake up and take notice of like pulp, like sword and sorcery pulps as legitimate areas of study, or maybe because there's some wrinkle in the plot in the future section of the plot that would be too easily resolved if things like the internet and social media existed yet.
Yeah.
Well, also, if you set it in 35, then there's no way I think Lilith would be alive at this time to be talking to him.
Well, okay, that's a point too. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. It's just a timeline thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I love what she has to say right there in the opening where he says, did you know who C.K. Cole was back then? Have you read any of his stories? Did that factor in at you taking the job? And she says, oh no, that was not sensible reading for one of my station. To this day, I haven't touched it. It's all trash, isn't it? I mean, is she telling the truth? We don't know yet what the actual lived in experience is for her, but why is she calling it trash if she's had an actual encounter at the end of this issue that we just don't know enough information about? So it'd be interesting to see what is she holding back, if anything. Why doesn't she read it? Is she not reading it because then she eventually gets put into the story as well? I mean, there's, like someone said, there's the possibilities, because it's only a first issue, are really great for that kind of speculation.
I'm excited. Like, I know this is only 6 issues, right? But I like the idea of more stories set in like a fantasy space. And I don't just mean like sword and sorcery fantasy, but like in the broader sense, like that Robert E. Howard, like you mentioned before, and that, like, even his Mars stuff was fantasy, right? It's not all just so. And this is like this, right? Like the beast and everything. Like it. I love fantasy, but it's not all just elves and dwarves, right? Like there's so much more. And again, we talked about nostalgia and like going back to like pre-elf and dwarf fantasy, like what was fantasy and sci-fi. It sort of all got blurred together a little bit, and I think it's like, I know this story will be over in 6 issues and Tom King will go off to do other things, and but like I love the idea of like some of those stories, getting new stories that feel like they're old stories.
Well, I mean, and so his Love Everlasting book from Image Comics is like a play on romance books, right? And that's been somewhat of an ongoing series. Um, so who's to say this wraps up in 6 issues but doesn't come around again in some other form? I feel like once we get more information, maybe it is, especially if you think of pulp stories, they were either short stories or just actual book length stories. They pumped those out, right? Like they just pumped them out, pumped them
Like
out,
that
pumped
10
them out.
cent dime novels.
Yes, right. So there could be a whole world for this. Um, you could tell it from the point of view that's being told in this issue. We could actually get the actual fantasy books drawn as comics, which could be fun, you know. I guess it depends on how readers take to this and what Dark Horse wants to back, if they back it up.
Well, yeah, one of the many variant covers I think was by Smallwood. I forget his first name, the artist who worked
Greg.
on. Thank you, Greg Smallwood, where it was the character in one of these one of C.K. Cole's stories as the cover for like one of the variant covers. So yeah, there's always that possibility. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm just blown away by like Tom King. Like right now, as this is being recorded, he's writing for DC with Wonder Woman, Image with Love Everlasting, Boom with Animal Pound, and here at Dark Horse, Helen of Wyndhorn. 4 different companies, 4 totally different genres of books. It's just kudos to him. You know, he's living his best life right now.
Well, his stuff sells, right? Retailers
Yeah.
have to be happy with him because it's like every time those hardcovers come out.
Well, yeah, he mentioned on social media the first issue sold out.
That's great.
Yeah.
Tim Sheridan on Facebook, I posted just something really quick today to see if anybody had read it. So Tim Sheridan says, it's kind of everything I want in a story. I'm all in and super excited to take this ride. And Brandon Christopher said, it's the same team as Supergirl and a great Gothic story. I'm in. So
Yeah, Tim Sheridan also said this might be what it takes for Tom King to finally break through. That being the running gag, because in the Best of Awards, you can only win the Breakthrough Talent Award once, and Tom has won it once, and the nominators have done all they can to try to get him to win it more than once, but one's the limit. Meanwhile, Tim Sheridan is nominated this year for Breakthrough Talent of 2023.
Oh, for what?
He wrote the Alan Scott Green Lantern
Oh,
miniseries.
right. Yes, of course. I thought the name sounded familiar, but I didn't my fingers, as you heard just not too long ago, were all over the place. Any final thoughts on this?
Just really enjoying the art, the mystery. You know where this is going to go. I'm kind of sad it's only 6 issues. It's like I could read this as an ongoing, but I like that he's probably going to tell a great concise story. He can always revisit it later on if he wants to.
And I have to imagine by the time we get to the 6th issue, you're going to go back and read the first issue and it's going to mean something different.
Right.
It happened in Wonder Woman. It happened in Danger Street.
Careful, I haven't read those books yet.
Okay.
Well, Danger Street I haven't read.
But it's I enjoy comics like that. I mean, he's not the only one that does that, but it's like you get to that last page or you get to the last issue and suddenly the whole entire thing means something else.
Recontextualized.
Yeah, love that. Just really a fan of that.
Well-crafted, enjoyable genre inversion, kind of thing that Tom has proven he can do very well.
Yeah, and interesting and feels fresh, right? Not a lot of comics like this, and that's great.
And I say read it in the issues, if you're someone that actually likes to, because there's enough here. There's enough dialogue, there's enough to look at. Like, I think you do get your money's worth if you're going to get this single. I mean, I know there's people who like the collection, which is fine. But I also feel like there aren't many books that I'm like, oh yeah, definitely get that single issue. This one's, yeah, I took my time reading it, So I definitely feel like I got, it has that worth. So there you go, 4 buys. We will probably try to do this every so often. We'll pick some other new first issue to talk about, some current stuff. If you want to give us feedback, comicgeekspeak.com. I don't have any of the other information. Go follow the Twitter. Go follow the Instagram. Go follow our new TikTok.
Is that just only Comic Geek Speak, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're everywhere. YouTube, et cetera. Let us know if you're coming to the CGS 20th anniversary, whatever the name is going to be, Super Bash Soiree Gathering thingy. If this comes out before the April 7th deadline, your best of announcement, Adam?
You can send in your votes. You can find the complete slate of nominees at our supergroup on Facebook. Just vote for one nominee in at least 12 of the 16 categories and send it to bestof at bestof at comicgeekspeak.com by the midnight on Sunday, April 7th, basically. And so you can vote for Tim Sheridan. Or vote for Daniel Warren Johnson, or the other nominees in that category.
There you go. All right. And anything else we haven't mentioned? PayPal, this, or PayPal, not PayPal. Patreon, this, that, and the other. Yada, yada. You know the drill. I'm out of the loop. I'm out of the game. Whatever.
And as always, we're uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
Thank you, man.